This is recording now, so I don't want to move it. Boy, that comes through very sharp. Yep, him over there. You launch beer? Yeah, kind of the gray hair, balding. Yeah.
That's Vaughn. Well, it's that on the other side of your eye.
Was that George and Agatha Burnett over there?
Burnett, yeah, George Burnett. Yeah, Burnett.
A very intriguing chapter in Ames history. Bob Deppe is here to talk about his experience as the owner of an elevator, a grain elevator, actually three grain elevators. Bob was not in the elevator business at all. As a matter of fact, it's hard to believe what he was doing prior to owning an elevator. He and his wife were teaching, say it again, Bob, you were social studies teacher. And the elevator was in his wife's family, and in 1956, he came to Ames with the opportunity to buy the elevator and to get into the elevator business. The one in Ames was the first of three that he owned. The other two were in Kelly and Fernald. And one by one, the elevators were sold, and with the final elevator being sold in 1993. So Bob is here as a first-hand witness to a very interesting chapter, and let's welcome him with a round of applause.
Guide for tonight. The picture that you see up here now is what we call the North House. Why grain elevators are called houses, I don't know, but that's throughout the grain trade. It always is the same. The North House was a cribbed building, like the model that you saw out in the lobby, where 2x10s and 2x8s were laid up 70 feet high. And they all interlocked with wooden braces. Some of the worn out ones are laying over here on the deck there. And over the years, 70 years, grain tends to wear things out like wood, and then they fell down in the bottom and plugged up our spouting, of course. The south building was really a different make and model. They used to have all the way down to Lincoln Way, which was called Moon Street. They had corn cribs, ear corn cribs. And as the year went along, they'd empty a crib, bring it up to the elevator, shell it. They had an in-house sheller, and then get rid of it that way. Well, they thought they had a good idea. They built a 55,000 bushel ear corn crib, and that was the South House then. When it burned, it was a glorious fire because it had boat holes in it, and it held all kinds of things, but it was called the balloon-type structure. It started out as slotted walls, like a farm ear corn crib, and then it was covered with steel on the inside, and then webbing the rod to withhold the pressure of 55,000 bushels of small grain. But that's the basic story on it. The unique feature of the north elevator is called a transfer house. And you'll see another picture slide in here of a transfer house in Illinois. Transfer house means that you had a railroad scale and dump pits right by the railroad scale. Pole boards that ran off electric cables were steam powered back in the ancient days, where they dumped the grain, took it into the elevator, cleaned it, dried it, transshipped it out to another place like Peoria, Illinois, or Chicago, or someplace like that. The small building in the center was a small storage building used for grain and a lot of other things. And the fire was suggested to me at Kiwanis Club one day. Roger Sweet, who was with the University Fire Service out here, he's departed now, he died a few years ago. Roger asked me one day, he said, "Little Bird told me that you want to get rid of your grain elevator." I said, "Yes, we've been taking bids to tear them down. Contractors want part of the walls." He said, "How'd you like to get rid of them in 3 days?" I said, "Great idea. What's it going to cost?" "Nothing. The city wants you out of here." We made too much dust downtown. The city was getting too modern. We blocked traffic with the big tractors that were coming in. So I said, I don't think it's possible, but go ahead. He said, well, we already have the permission of the feds, the state, the railroad, and maybe the city. The city said if they will give the permission, they'll furnish all the water we need and traffic control and everything. I said, go for it. One little hitch. Brand new gas station right next door where Zach Dunlap's Cadillac used car lot used to be. The gas station was brand new. They wanted to get it open, have a big grand opening. The city said you can't put any gas in those things, the pits, until Deppe burned down the elevator. They were not happy neighbors for a long time. Anyway, on the morning in October, on Friday, there were 83 firemen from 43 fire departments gathered from all over the state for this official University Fire Service school. The small building was the first to go then. They did the things like, I had to light all the fires, all three of them. But then they practiced pulling out dummies and with masks on and all that type of thing. And they finally let it burn out about 8:30 that night. And then I had to have fire watchers. And you're going to see these guys also that stayed all night. One was my oldest son, Mike. He was in high school. Two of his friends, and my esteemed friend and lawyer, Don Newbrough. He was the fire captain to keep the vandals away. So, because too many taverns nearby, they like to play with fire embers, I guess. Yeah. Anyway, Roger Sweet did a great job. They had fire control equipment from the big manufacturer in Nebraska and others, and then brand new machinery out of Des Moines and West Des Moines. And these people really wanted to practice. And you'll see the results. You probably did already in the films that you saw already of how effective they were. It truly was an end of the era in Ames because the first elevator went back to 1867, a small bag elevator they called it. It didn't elevate whole grain, it just bag grain. They shipped that out then at that time. This picture here shows Onondaga Street, Main Street, and this is in front of the elevator that was in existence that time. And it's a very, very interesting picture because George Bell became ill. He was a farmer. He sold 47 loads of corn to Lockwood Grain Company on Main Street there. Lockwood, we think, was leasing this elevator from somebody else and building the big elevator on the south side that I burned out. This one here is on the north side where Ron's barber shop is now. Anyway, he sold 47 loads of corn to Lockwood Grain at 11 cents a bushel. Friends and neighbors of Bell picked 2,204 bushels. He was too ill to do all the work for himself. This photograph looks west from Duff Avenue on Onondaga, renamed Main Street in downtown Ames. 47 loads of corn, 2,204 bushels, 47 bushels to the load. That sounds like a small load in modern times, but you got to remember these all came in with horses and little dray wagons at that time. The next picture here shows the view from, the top picture shows the view from down at Kellogg and Lincoln Way now. And the big field across there was all airborne trips at one time. This view is about 1897. The lower left-hand picture shows the name B.A. Lockwood Grain on the shed there. And the caption here is kind of interesting. It says, 100 years ago, Mr. Lockwood was going to try to rid his cribs and buildings of the curse of being a common card-playing shop and liquor-drinking resort. Why should he be called upon to furnish accommodations free for such doings for such people as in the past have frequented this vicinity? It's hard to tell. Anyway, they like to play cards in the old corn cribs, I guess. The next picture is an information picture. I'll talk about man lifts, legs, and pits. The picture on your left here shows the grain going down in the driveway into the pit, being picked up by a bucket elevator. The picture on the right then is a bucket elevator. The name elevator comes from elevating corn to the top. This is a rope drive elevator, which was most common in the old days because All power came from one central unit, steam or diesel fuel engine. And then it ran on a whole series of tumbling rods, belts, and ropes. This happens to be a rope drive elevator, and that weight in the middle keeps that tense. No matter, and it keeps the belts running on time. There's an elevator pictured in one of my books from 1912. It's a giant elevator in Montreal, Canada, and it had 5 miles of rope to drive all the different legs and elevating equipment in. 5 miles is a lot of rope. Needless to say, the most valuable man on staff would be somebody who would splice a rope and make it run smooth over all those pulleys. The next picture would show how the elevator was built here. And George Todd and Sergeant. George has been gone some time now. He built one of the last buildings in Iowa, the second last that we know of that type of construction for me down in Kelly when we built the annex down there in 1962. These people worked their way up from the bottom and with all interlocking cribbing, just like the sample out in the hallway there. And this itinerant bunch of travelers traveled all over the Midwest and into Canada, building wooden houses like this, as they're called. This one has a driveway, a lot like the one here we had in the main house. And then, of course, we had the scale house on the north side that loaded and unloaded boxcars for shipping and treating grain. Here's the sample of rope drives in a big elevator. And this is what we're talking about. Imagine 5 miles of rope in one series of buildings to move grain on back and forth. But rope was more efficient than belting back in the old days. Belting broke too easy. This is a transfer elevator that I was talking about, transfer and cleaning elevator. It shows the rail cars going into a shed where they could be dumped, and then you would clean the grain or dry it or whatever. And it shows the engine house. The engine house in this case was a steam engine with a great big chimney coming out of it. And that was the initial drive unit in the Ames elevator also. This gives you a thrill the first time you ride it. It's called a man lift. You could call it a people lift in this modern day and age, of course. But it's only 28 inches by 28 inches. And it has a cable at the top of the little thing. It's not even a cage, it's just a platform. That goes over a pulley, then down in a tube that comes down in the ground. That's your counterweight. So the thing is set up for the average man's weight, which would be about 147 pounds in the old days. The only problem is one year I had a fellow that weighed 127 pounds and one that weighed 240 pounds. So they were always adding weights or just taking off weights when they got on the man lift because it was his job to get up and down. You want to build your elevators right, or this is what happens. This is one in Canada, it happens to be, but they happened all over the country. One in Cleveland was famous because it went over, it went all the way into the Great Lakes. And awful mess to clean up of that. This is what the elevator looked like when Carol and I came to town. And the old feed mill had the long spout running down to it. That feed mill was a burr mill, which meant 2 giant steel burr plates running against her, a series of plates. Quite inefficient, took an awful lot of power. So in 1961, we built the new feed mill on there, which unfortunately we had to destroy along with the elevator in 1978. This is the elevator as we worked throughout the years, and the scale was installed in 1953, brand new, and they modernized some of the elevator. After I came here in 56, then we had to add all new electrical components within the elevator and a new driveway for modern trucks and big tractors. We put this picture in because I happen to have it. It's of an open house. We used to do this every spring, very, very early, and have an annual outing for farmers could come in and have coffee, ham sandwiches, and then of course we tried to sell them a lot of seed, fertilizer, and feed at that time. We merchandised quite a few carloads that way. There's the elevator again with the old feed mill on it. And there's the firebug. One of the things that the insurance company asked me to do was to light all 3 fires, because then I couldn't say somebody else did it. I couldn't call it arson. It's just a firebug. This is a small building where they practice tanks and so on their outfits and breathing masks and so on Friday. And then they put that out, and then everybody assembled on Saturday the next day. The building had a pretty good fire going here, and then they decided to let it go. Then they had to protect the other buildings because they're going to save them for 2 more days of fires. They didn't want them to spread at night. This is a pretty good blaze going with a lot of oat holes and dust. Firemen just stood back and let it, they cooled just the walls toward the other 2 elevators. Here's my trusty fire crew, my son, his classmates, and Don Newbrough, my old attorney friend. You got to have an attorney on hand, you know. The equipment was magnificent. We got equipment from manufacturers in Omaha and Illinois, and we had the new equipment from Des Moines, and they really wanted to practice. And the city gave us all the hydrants we wanted, and you know, they didn't want no fire to spread. The remarkable thing about this, most of the time when they have a fire like this, a controlled burn near a railroad, they'll shut the railroad down because of the danger with tank cars and so on. The fire school people guaranteed that it would not go, the heat would not go toward the railroad. And we have, well, you saw one picture in the film earlier where 2 cars are passing or 2 trains are passing, and no interruption in the fire school at all. More of the first day burn, just keeping the other buildings cool, and more. We're down to the bottom. And there's my view out the office window. I had never had such a beautiful view to the west. It was quite an evening. The next morning, I went up to the top on the man lift, pulled the rope, myself up on the rope, and took my trusty matches along and my fuel oil because the firemen had been up there already and put a rope wick down in a bin. They chopped a big hole in the floor. And this big paper rope is what it was. And then they just gave me instructions to pour the fuel oil down the paper rope and then light the fire and then get your butt down. So, anyway, one of my friends in the grain elevator building business said, "I'll bet that's the fastest ride you ever had down that thing." It's not much of a platform, 28 inches by 28 inches. As the fire got going, it took a while, by the way. I came down, walked outside, and no smoke, because the smoke was going down in that bin, and then the fire attacked the outer wall. But they wanted all the fire on that south wall, and they wanted the north wall kept standing and cold, because all the power from the Ames power plant going to the university, you'll see on one of these pictures where all those giant wires are hanging very close to the buildings here. The city of Ames manager almost called it off because that's too close, he said. The West Des Moines fire chief assured him that the wires would be cooler than you are. So. The fire went up to the top a little faster than they had anticipated, so they really had to fight the north wall. The shadow side is the north wall there. So a lot of water was being poured on that all the time. The corn dryers and all the equipment, all the big tanks and everything had been moved. Feed mixers had been sold, all that type of thing. This is the southwest corner, or southeast corner. No, southwest, pardon me. And this is the loading shed on the north wall. These 2 gentlemen are John and Bob Buckles. I don't know if any of you remember, they farmed out here southeast of town. Their landlord was Mr. Garfield, the Supreme Court Justice, a lawyer, well known. He was a partnership with Mr. Lee in owning land and in this law business at one time. But we took the picture because they were the same age as the grain elevator, 75 years. More water just to keep everything cool. On that side particularly, because right above that is where the power lines ran out to Iowa State University. You can see what they're doing. South side there is falling in. They just keep pumping water on that north wall. The problem is fire doesn't always do what you want it to do, and it popped under in an open area and got in that shed, and so they had their hands full for a while keeping that cool. The whole thing only took about an hour and 40 minutes, less than that, to get down in the pit. It was great control. We had photographers from everywhere. They blocked Duff Avenue, made the police mad. Back in those days, why train traffic just kept going, just like it does now. Not quite as many trains then as now, but still an awful lot. You can see the view from the north there, and the feed mill on the left is the one I built in 1960. Many spectators. And then they had fire people to keep the spectators from getting too close, of course. Now we're getting to the end where we're pushing that wall in and pushing the fire away from the electric wires up on top. And we're about done with that part of the thing. No, not quite. They had to show the driveway. The university has some pictures of that when the fire was most intense. And that big double driveway on the south was just a boiling mass of different colors of greens and reds, oranges, and clean burn, not much smoke in that. Here's the big powerful machine to put out the fire temporarily. And this is a Sunday morning, and the wind went down. Everybody was grateful, and they were standing around getting their instructions, and they were told that we're not going to try to put this thing out because this is a balloon building. It's not the crib thing. And if we don't control it really carefully, why this thing could go and fall out on us. And that's the one thing they didn't want. It's the tallest deer corn crib we have ever heard of any place. This building here, we lit on the bottom because we knew it would spread too fast in there. Now you want to see a dirty smoke? That's boat holes and all kinds of dust within these walls. The wall was put on top of a wall. We had telephone calls from Marshalltown saying, what's going on over there? Because nobody told them we were going to have, they had read the paper enough, I guess. But this building only took about 45 minutes to put down to ground. Very, very dirty, and the smoke went pretty much straight up. And the firemen got to really practice. Nice rainbow. Shorter and shorter and shorter. And that's the end. Now, the thing I left out is the little bit of the history, and I put it off intentionally. The grain elevator was built about 1903 or 4. That part of the structure. Originally, there was a bag elevator on the south where they loaded bags of wheat in cars to ship mostly to the Far East. The names that go back on the abstract are interesting. Number 1, White Sherman, 1855. 1856, John S. Adams. 1857, G.H. Crosley. 1864, Cynthia Duff. 1864, she sold to John Blair, the big real estate developer. 1874-75, the first bag warehouse was on the south side, and that's when the Lockwood Grain got their title of land on the south side. Lockwood Grain also acquired Shipley, Kelly, Napier, and so on, and that's where they brought grain in to be cleaned, dried, and transshipped. Unfortunately, the big panic of 1906-07 really hammered Lockwood Grain. That was the story we got anyway. And Lockwood Grain went bankrupt. Then some very, very interesting people get into owning this Central Iowa Grain. Parley Sheldon, Sheldon Munn Hotel. And then the speculators, Meltzer, Rounds, and R.A. Crawford. Then it was sold to A.H. Munn, the Union Bank and Trust had the mortgage evidently, and Lee and Garfield were the attorneys on that. The land was sold to Ames, Grain and Coal by Parley Sheldon, H.W. Stafford, Bob Stafford's grandfather, and his wife Cora, and the heirs of a banker named Cyberly. They owned some of the land from Lincoln Way, from Duff Avenue over to Kellogg, and almost up to the annex, that you saw the last building to burn. Ames Grain and Coal, 1951, sold out to Rex Purviance. And I'm sure many of you remember Rex. He was in the real estate business. And he bought all the land from Duff Avenue way to the west, right up to the furnace store that trotted on Kellogg. And he sold parts off to Mr. C.A. Rogers at the hardware store and other people. Rex Purviance didn't have the elevator very long. He sold off some properties. He sold the elevator then to my mother-in-law, Carol's mother, Gladys Froning from LaPorte City, and to Wayne Froning from Garrison, Iowa, because he was in the elevator business with them there. 1956, business was bad. We had a total drought. And Wayne Froning decided he was smart enough to sell out, and I was dumb enough to buy it. So Mr. Stafford, Clay Stafford, backed me on the purchase. Stafford's family was always very, very good to me. Then in 1987, or 89, pardon, we sold the land to, or 87, we sold it to the Hunsiger group that has the office building down there. I think it's enough detail. Do you have any questions? That's the next thing you can stump me with. I'm sure you know more history than I do.
Bob, did you sell molasses?
Oh, we sold molasses, and that's another story. We had a tank underneath the feed mill, original feed mill. And before we had the elevator, one of the newspaper stories about molasses was that they mismeasured the molasses. It was Cuban blackstrap molasses, very heavy, very rich for cattle feeding. So they brought in a tank car of molasses, put the spout down, didn't watch what they were doing, and the molasses overflowed the tank, went underneath the little bridge, went all the way down to Lincoln Way. Cars slipped around on it. The firemen were out there hosing it down and cursing the elevator people who were so dumb, I guess. And anyway, it was quite a story. And the other thing about blackstrap, Cuban blackstrap, was it was so rich, and ladies liked to cook with it. Only the grain elevator couldn't sell cooking molasses, so we sold chicken feed molasses. And we still did that until Fidel Castro came along, and then we had no more blackstrap molasses from Cuba. We got embargoed like everybody else did. The reason for closing the elevator down, I've hit on. The rail scale was too short, could not weigh hopper cars. We did not have a in-head at the top of the elevator scale to load them. And the new railroad rate structure by that time had changed. Now, to get a decent rate, you have to load 120 cars a day, 14 hours. And they never stop. They just keep going underneath the loading spouts. The only way for us to stay in business would have been a trucking house. And the land was more valuable for city land than it was for that. Any other questions?
The year that it shut down, and the year I didn't touch those. The year you stopped using it, and the year
Just a year apart. 78, we stopped operation. 79, we burned. And then I kept the warehouse for several years after that because I was holding and selling my equipment to other grain elevators. And I could just store it in there. And then along came a buyer, and that's how it got sold. And they did the Hunsiger group then bought it and made an office space in the bakery down there. Where the bakery sits now used to be a very large area of wooden grain doors. Wooden grain doors are what you nailed on the inside of the doors of a sliding doors of the boxcars. Put in 13 of those, cover them with paper, spike them in, then hope they get to market before they rupture. Any others?
Could you talk a little about the railroad? Rock Island, Chicago Northwestern, who were you serving?
We were on 2 railroads here in Ames. The CNNW was our elevator that served the in-house. But we got most of our grain shipped for a lot of years on the Fort Dodge one in Southern they called the electric line. And the depot, maybe most of you remember, many of you remember, was over where the credit union is, just north of the DOT now. And that was a service place. They had their grain doors stored there, but cars would come in there and then the CNNW would have to switch them in. We had a real good rate to East St. Louis. Budweiser said we were the best quality shipper into making beer for a long time. So. CNNW Rock Island service in Froning, however.
Could you tell us, besides corn and wheat, what you had, and when wheat, for example, went out of your business?
Wheat went out in 1957. Our last wheat producer was north of Nevada. Nevada wouldn't handle it for them, so we shipped it. It was turned over to the government in a government seeding program. And after that, the only wheat that was just raised to mix with hog feed, some of the farmers. Sorghum, because of the drought of 55 and 56, was popular for about 2 years. And then it went away because it just couldn't compete with corn. Oats was a big crop yet when we bought the elevator. In fact, after I bought it, I put in a big huller and roller mill. And for a long time, we were shipping out rolled oats in 100-pound bags, 2 feed mills. The rolled oat product for baby pig feed. But that business died in about 1960, and we had a buyer for that. Sometimes you're lucky what you got. When I bought the Ames elevator, it had no roller mill. I had to put it in. I needed the corn roller mill for turkey feed anyway. But it had an ear corn crusher, which same as getting a curse put on you, because it tied up your driveway. It was very slow, and it always broke down. Not as bad as what we inherited down at Kelly, though. We inherited an elevator that still had an ear corn sheller in-house, a cop bin and husk bin on the north side. And then it had a chicken plucker, believe it or not, in the basement of the feed mill. The chicken plucker, many of you know, is a big rubber drum with fingers on it. You scald the chicken, bleed the chicken, put him on the plucker, and feathers fly all over it. Unfortunately, the owner who sold the elevator to us had made contracts with a couple ladies to do their chickens, and they insisted on it. So we made them come back and do that. And then, believe it or not, we got a buyer for the chicken plucker. They went to the Hazelton Amish people up there, south of Hazelton. Some days you get lucky.
Where were the stockyards located?
Pardon me?
Where was the stockyards?
Stockyard, there was one stock.
In relation to the elevator.
Well, the hog buying station that was run by Kenny Randall was on Kellogg. And that was right by the railroad tracks on Kellogg. And he bought hogs from people and then loaded them on the boxcars and shipped it to Chicago to the packing plants back then.
And they went out about when?
Oh my, he was only in business a few years after I came here. And then, if you remember, a barbecue place went in there, and then the furniture store, and I don't know what's in there now. And his father-in-law was a man who had the big sale barn down on South Duff Avenue where Montgomery Ward went in. And that's another story.
Bob, 2 questions. How big was your trade area, and what brands of seed did you carry?
Well, we carried seed is Northern Pig was our primary, and feed was Kent Feed. They had a good line. When I came here, we had 2 lines, Wayne and Kent. Wayne was shipped out of Indiana, very not handy for us, and we thought Kent was a better line. The first few years, we got all our feed on boxcars in bags. And then after that, of course, everything went full. Northrop King seed, so we'd sell 2 carloads of alfalfa, clover, and that type of seed every spring, seed corn. Very, very primitive. No weed control in your seed corn back then.
What was your trade area?
The trade area was, we figured about 10 miles. And I'd have 900 people on my mailing list in a 15-mile radius. And cattle feed was our big, big business. We had cattle feeders everywhere back in those days. Those are all gone now.
How many people did you employ?
5, 6, depending, you know. Less when we got Kelly because we were able to move people back and forth then. Fernall stood alone, though. That was a separate corporation, different owners that started that one over there. All 3 places I built a new feed mill after I took them over.
What kind of wildlife came out of your crib as it was burning?
Pardon me?
What kind of wildlife came out of your crib as it was burning?
Almost none, because we really controlled rats with poison. We used the liquid poison after we locked everything off. And we had professionals come in, and they saw 3 rats in 3 days of burning my elevator. And they said they expected hundreds, you know. And they weren't there because they didn't live very long if they came in. Of course, we cleaned the bins out, and we sucked all the dirt out of the bottom, too.
I would have expected the burn to be of a lot of interest to the people living in Ames, but I didn't see very many people in any of the pictures.
Well, they kept them back. They're out in the middle of Duff Avenue or across the street at Hanson Lumber.
But there were a lot of people there.
There were a lot of people. In fact, there were step ladders out in Duff Avenue. Made the police a little antsy, you know.
Let's see a show of hands. Who was there?
Pardon me?
Let's see a show of hands. Who was there to see it burn? In this audience, was anyone there?
Anybody here that saw the burn? Raise your hand. No. Not too many of them. Maybe you don't like fires. I like the sound of baseball. Alan? Oh, by the way, if you want to come up afterwards, I brought in some things that date back 100 years. There's an ear corn probe here. There's a thing called a torsion balance scale that you can put a sample in here, and you can shake down and do your test weight. It gives percentages and everything. Here we're burning down the south elevator, and this is a dirty, dirty fire. And the big unit right before you there, that's the West Des Moines truck, which they were so proud of because they could do anything with it. They could make a huge water fan, they could make a power spout, they could do anything. And do more than one spout at a time. There's some pieces falling off. Somebody asked me about the sheeting earlier that you put on a grain elevator. Why are the sheets only 30 or 36 inches long? And that's because elevators shrink on one side or the other. If you fill 3 bins on one side with beans and the other is empty, then the building tilts. And when you're up on top, that's a funny feeling the first time it happens to you. But anyway, if you had regular long strips, it'd just wrinkle on you and tear off. That's when they could see the fire in Marshalltown, or the smoke, I mean.
Wouldn't there have been terrible smoke in the city?
No,
There wasn't.
it went up. The Saturday fire went to the, just followed, pretty much followed Lincoln Way to the east. And this Sunday fire, it just went straight up in the air. That's why they could see it in Marshalltown. Very little side wind. Oh yeah. A lot of steam off of those metal plates.
How far away could they feel the heat? Could the people standing there?
Well, you can see where the firemen are. They take turns and go back and forth. It was hot. kept running around and hoping no children were nearby. And we chased them away. My son and his 2 high school friends were good policemen. This is a scene here from the southwest side. You see 2 poles in the smoke there. There's big transformers on there. And they kept water on those all the time. And they never even scalded. It was controlled. The posts weren't scalded or anything on it.
Where would the present Dutch oven be in relation to?
Dutch oven would be the first building you saw burn, the north one, I mean, the big building. Go northwest, and that was an open area that we had grain door stored. That's where the Dutch oven is now. In the grain door piles, they should get carloads of those things. 14 doors to a car.
Was there any warning to the residents of Ames about low water pressure during this time?
It did affect them because the wells that served this area, they had an east well and then they had the, A Street well, I think it is. And then they had one on Sherman. And they're all blocked together there that serve those hydrants or hand pipes. We didn't hear of any report anyway. They were pretty well prepared all the way around. Now, the north house, though, was the last transfer house in the Midwest made of wood. And like one of my friends says, if we'd have known that, we wouldn't have let you burn it down. I said, well, then you would have had to pay me.
Is there any evidence of those buildings that still exist there, any old foundations, or is all evidence gone?
No, Hunsikers tore it all out completely, even the scale pit. They took every last piece of that out. There was a little bit of contaminated soil under where we had a gas storage tank. They had to haul that out and spread it over so many acres and, to follow the plan back in those days.
Bob, remind us again, who was Ames fire chief at that time?
Oh, boy.
Ralph Parks.
Parks?
Yeah, Parks.
Ralph Parks.
I really don't know if it's Bob Parks or the guy before him.